Okay, let's dive into this explainer on complementary cognition and the ancient specialist. Have you even noticed that somewhere out there, right now, there is a kid who knows just absolutely everything about one specific thing? Like maybe it's the entire taxonomic classification of every single beetle on Earth, and they can rattle off facts for hours in this beautiful, exhausting detail. Or maybe think about that person in your office who spots the one tiny error in a massive spreadsheet, an error that like 40 other people just scrolled right past. Or that person in a meeting who just blurts out the blunt, honest truth that literally nobody else was willing to say.
And we actually have a whole vocabulary for these folks in our modern world. We call them odd, intense, too much, or, not a team player. We've basically built a society that actively pathologizes these traits. We treat this incredibly focused type of mind like it's a glitch, right? Like a malfunction that needs to be medicated or smoothed out just so they can fit neatly into a standard classroom or a tiny little office cubicle. But I really want you to ask yourself something. What if there was literally never anything wrong with them at all? Let's actually rewind the clock. Past the open plan offices, past the rigid school systems, past this entire modern machine that gets to decide what a normal brain looks like. Let's go all the way back to the ancient tribal world, because in that brutal, unforgiving environment, this exact same mind, the one we are so quick to label as disordered today, might have actually been one of the most essential members of the entire tribe.
So, to get there, we first need to completely demolish a massive assumption. The myth we're taught is that ancient tribes only needed perfectly identical, socially sharp, highly adaptable generalists. The whole survival of the fittest generalist idea. But the reality, it's completely different. A group of people who are all exactly the same isn't actually strong. It's fragile, like dangerously fragile. If everyone in your survival group has the exact same brain, the same strengths, and the same way of seeing the world, well, your whole group shares the exact same blind spots. The exact same problem is going to trip all of you up at the exact same time.
And that brings us to this absolutely fascinating concept researchers call complementary cognition. Real resilience doesn't come from a tribe of clones. Human groups actually succeeded by combining radically different cognitive styles into a cohesive ecosystem. It's honestly an incredibly beautiful idea when you think about it. Combining wildly different minds creates an entity that is far more resilient than any single cognitive style ever could be on its own. When you start looking at an ancient tribe as an interconnected ecosystem of different minds doing fundamentally different jobs, the highly specialized mind doesn't look like an outsider anymore. It looks like a crucial specialist the system was practically built to include.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of that specialization. 10,000. That is the 10,000 hours of joyful, relentless, obsessive focus required for someone to truly become a master. In the ancient world, human survival ran on deep expert knowledge. Which plants are toxic? What are the subtle migration patterns of the animals? Somebody had to hold this vast, intricate, life-or-death body of expertise in their head. The mind built to lock onto one single subject and just absorb it with obsessive intensity isn't flawed. It's the perfect mind to become the tribe's living library, spending those 10,000 hours keeping everyone alive while the generalists manage the everyday social politics.
It is honestly amazing how fast we can reframe these so-called deficits, right? The exact same trait that gets a kid sent to the principal's office today made them the ultimate master of domain knowledge out in the wild. Obsessive focus in a modern office? That was the living library in the tribe. And what about that nagging distraction? The person who just cannot ignore the flickering fluorescent light or the slightly crooked picture frame? Out in the wild, that relentless pattern recognition makes you the master tracker. You are the one who notices the faint track in the dirt, the subtle shift in the grass, the tiny difference between a safe berry and a lethal one. You catch the critical anomaly that everyone else's brain just smoothly ignores. Let's actually look at how this builds into human innovation. Take the systemizer. Think about early tool making for a second. Making a truly good, reliable stone tool wasn't about navigating messy social dynamics. Knapping flint into a precise, deadly blade required a deep understanding of materials, angles, and forces. It literally required someone who delighted in getting a method exactly right and perfectly repeating complex physical systems over and over. Researchers strongly argue that the great leaps in human technology required exactly this kind of detail-obsessed, highly systematized cognition. They built the tools that made us who we are. And then, oh man, there's honesty. In the modern corporate world, being strikingly, inconveniently direct gets read as a major deficit. People say you lack social cues or you're just way too blunt. But let's flip that around. In a small, ancient survival group, your actual life is tied to whether you can trust the people around you. Reframe that blunt honesty from a modern annoyance into an incredible life or death asset. You absolutely want the person who literally cannot and will not lie to you, the person who isn't quietly running some complex political angle. That lack of social deception meant they provided the ultimate, incorruptible trust for the group. But this independence, it goes way beyond just telling the truth. It completely changes how the whole group makes decisions. We're talking about being immune to groupthink. A lot of specialist cognition is simply far less pulled along by the need for social conformity. Think about it. When a whole group of highly socially tuned people gets swept up in a sudden panic or a genuinely bad idea, they can confidently march together right off a cliff. The absolute most valuable person in that moment is the one whose brain doesn't just get swept along with the herd. The mind that stays clear, looks at the actual hard evidence, and stubbornly refuses to yield to social pressure is the mind that stops the entire tribe from making a fatal mistake. We also really have to look at the sensory dimension here. It's an undeniable reality that many specialist minds experience the sensory world incredibly intensely. In our modern environment, packed full of painful fluorescent lights, blaring traffic noise, and crowded shopping malls, this leads to real, exhausting sensory overload. But take that exact same heightened sensitivity and drop it into the wild. That acute perception means you smell the smoke, you hear the stealthy predator, or you feel the weather shift long before anyone else even notices. That modern overload was the ancient sentinel's gift. It was literally the crucial early warning system for the entire tribe. And hey, what about a love for routine? Modern life prizes constant chaotic change, right? We treat the need for consistency as being rigid or stubborn. But remember, before the invention of writing, a huge amount of survival knowledge was strictly procedural, the exact step-by-step sequence to prepare a toxic food so it actually becomes safe to eat, the precise, tested method for building a shelter that won't collapse. A rigid love for routine ensured this complex, generation-spanning knowledge actually survived. The person who insists on doing it exactly right every single time is the keeper of methods. They preserve life-saving recipes perfectly intact without them drifting or corrupting over generations. So, when we step back and look at the big picture, we see this incredible ancient toolkit, right? You've got the tracker who spots the hidden danger, the toolmaker who builds the advanced tech, the sentinel who hears the distant warning, the truth teller who holds the group's trust, the keeper who preserves the life-saving methods. I mean, these are absolutely essential, irreplaceable roles. The socially gifted generalists and the deeply focused specialists acted as two halves of a whole, each one covered for the other's blind spots. The generalist kept the group bonded together, sure, but the specialist kept the group alive. Now, I actually want to slow all the way down here for a second, because this nuance is absolutely vital to get right. As the source material points out, we aren't just saying this is secretly a superpower and everything is perfectly fine. Autism is a wide spectrum. For many, it comes with profound, real-world challenges, needing significant daily support and struggling with things the modern world simply makes zero accommodation for. This explainer isn't about romanticizing those very real daily difficulties or pretending they just don't exist. Those challenges deserve genuine, systemic support, not just a feel-good motivational poster. And look, we shouldn't paint the ancient world as some perfectly accepting, loving utopia either. I mean, life back then was incredibly brutal and merciless. The point we are making here is narrower, but it's incredibly empowering. The point is that these specific cognitive traits were not inherently doomed or useless. In concrete, historical contexts, they were undeniable, powerful advantages that provided genuine value and undeniable contribution to human survival.
Which really leads us to this massive climactic realization. The brain didn't break. The environment changed. The autistic mind didn't just suddenly appear out of nowhere as a modern defect. It is an ancient, deeply recurring kind of human mind. What actually changed is that we built a modern world entirely for flexible social generalists. We built a society of open-plan offices, endless small talk, and constant social performance, which just happens to be brutally, profoundly hostile to the specialist mind. We mistook being bad at fitting into our highly specific, totally artificial modern environment for being fundamentally broken.
I absolutely love this vivid metaphor from our source material on this. A deep-sea creature isn't defective just because it's bad at living in a desert. Struggling in a completely unnatural environment, like a loud, chaotic, fluorescent-lit office, doesn't mean your mind is a malfunction. For the vast majority of human history, this mind was thriving and contributing in a major way. It only started looking like a glitch when we constructed a society that simply forgot how to make a place for the specialist. So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on. Are you a specialist in a world built for generalists? Or, maybe you know someone who is. We absolutely did not conquer this planet by being a single kind of flawlessly smooth, identical mind. We did it by being a wild, varied collection of different brains, relying deeply on complementary cognition, catching what the others dropped. And honestly, the strangest, most beautiful part is that we still desperately need that quiet, deep, detailed, honest work of the specialist today. We've just built a world loud enough to drown that fact out. Thanks so much for joining me on.
Okay, let's